I'd like to call to order the 924th meeting of the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, known now as AlexRenew. Members of the board, take a look at the agenda and entertain a motion to approve. So moved. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public?
No members of the public wishing to speak.
We're competing with holiday shopping.
Yeah, that too.
We'll take a look at the consent agenda, minutes from our meeting on the 19th of November. Motion to approve the minutes from that meeting. Second. All in favor? Administrative items, any updates from finance and audit?
Other than you will find the printed version, the fun reading, that stand. Guaranteed to keep you awake, right? At least some of us. Exciting, but here it is. Congratulations, staff. Job well done.
Get the heart racing.
Anything from governance? Good. Board retreat coming up in February. It's far away, but it's not. Carl, any tips?
We'll be assigning the board a light homework assignment on pricing effective principles after the holiday. They will bring the results of that to the meeting. So keep an eye out for that email after the holiday.
No homework over the holidays?
Now, we decided it's nice.
Posted schedule. Okay, the phase forward dashboard, and I'm sure someone will translate.
Yes, maybe two items before we get to that. In your green folders, there's a copy of the annual report. The annual report as well. That's the final annual report. It's on the website. The last meeting, the board asked staff to make sure that the annual report was accessible to the public, primarily around the budget infographic in the middle of the document. So tomorrow, the annual report will be live on your customer portal. There'll be a link there to be able to view the annual report through myafternoon.com. In addition to that, it's on the website already, and it's in the process of being translated to the three languages that we typically translate to Spanish and then Arabic. That'll be also up on the web shortly. We also included the bill stuff for the board to ask. I don't know if you got your bill yet this month, but it was been in there with the July 3rd bill to do that document.
I will get this out to the Federation of States Associations.
Yeah, we got more copies.
I'll bring hard copies at their next meeting, in-person meeting. Won't be until January. But I will send the link out to the AFCA president this week. This is very good.
Yeah, one item for governance is we do have the UNC conference coming up. We're working on making arrangements for Mr. James to come for Bill to attend. His office available if you need help with flights, or I know we have the hotel reservation on the conference. Allison Diamonds, our chief water quality officer, will be attending. So we'll make sure we connect all of you before we do that. And I believe you're presenting. Maybe quick reminder, for feedback or governance, make sure we introduce staff at the beginning of the meeting. Start with Brianna from my right, just quick introduction, name and role.
Grant Michelle with Brown Cobalt Program.
Evening, Terry Vane, managing principal.
Anthony?
Anthony Cummings, site extraordinaire.
Miles?
Hi, Miles Skipper, legislative policy officer.
John?
John McGettigan, Brown and Caldwell.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know the other, right?
I do, and welcome everybody, and thanks for being here. It's good to see people here.
All right, phase 4 dashboard. Part 2. So based on the Riverview job, getting that phase 4 is happening over an extended period of time. 7 8 years. We wanted a way to track progress, so we modeled a very condensed version of the Riverview dashboard into a two-page dashboard for phase 4. This is a draft to get feedback from the board before we finalize this and start using it. But you can see on page 1, we tried to capture what the projects are, the purpose of phase 4, schedule for all of the projects, showing big bars for design, procurement, construction, and then spending to date. And if you look at the spending to date, it's going to be capital spending for each project. We broke that down between design and construction for the overall total. And then we're trying to highlight how much local spending we have on the job as well. So we learn from Riverview, it's a good story to tell, so we are seeking funding from the General Assembly of the state or others to show how much the police funds are coming back locally to Virginia. And we really gonna do. On the back, it's for Epsom right now. What we will be doing is highlighting each of the projects month over month with a narrative of progress and then a content photo. You know, right now we can't take a bunch of pictures of people sitting in office during the time while they're sitting in meetings. But you can see how this kind of evolve over time. So a lot of what we had in the Riverview dashboard packed into 2 pages, a little lighter on the eyes and we'll put it with you. So
I'm sorry.
looking for feedback over the holiday for the next board meeting.
Who's the intended audience for this?
So
This is just for us. Okay.
Just quick feedback right now. One, thank you, and this is very, very good and also very necessary. On the spending to date, it would be, if we could include a column on totals in the CLP. I was looking for and
the budgeted total.
yeah,
Yes, you can see what percentage of the, spending, anticipated spending.
and up the top, the description of the overall project. See if we could rewrite that in terms of what the public sees. Water that's almost clean enough to drink. And stuff you could apply to the land. I made that up. Something like that. That's really what this is. Really clean water. Solid products that are. You're good with words. Think about that. Yeah. This is a big investment. I think we have, just like we did, we were going to tie it back to public health. Very good, very good, very necessary. Ready to move on to new business? Okay, let's jump right into contract 2501, engineering basic ordering agreements. This is a joint use item.
Sure. So just a couple highlights from the memo. Basic ordering agreements are so a lot of different terms used in the industry. Basically on-call services for professional services. In our sense, that's engineering. So our current BOA is expired next month. And we want to continue to be able to use these BOAs to support our ongoing work at our community. So we put out an RFP to solicit new BOAs. Mr. Fallon presented on this and it's brought beyond last meeting. And giving an overview of the scope, I'll hold on that. I guess from the standpoint of budget funding on the BOAs, these are aligned, the way the contracts are structured is they're aligned with code. Code gives you a 1-year contract that's renewable for 3 years. You can have a total of 10 million spent on each basic boarding agreement in the course of a year and not to exceed a price of 2.5 million for any single project. I don't think there's ever been a year in history that AlexRenew spent $10 million on a single dollar. I do $50 million for $5 that were requested to be approved. So it's just an upper threshold that is used by the state for this type of procurement. So what we're requesting the board's approval tonight is authorization to execute 5 contracts. They're in order, alphabetical order: Brown & Caldwell, Corolla, Cheap Street, Minnesota, and Jacobs. 3 of those firms we currently have under BOA: Brown & Caldwell, Cheap Street, and Jacobs, Corolla, and Hagen. When we did the RFP, we looked at our capital improvement plan, which is aligned to our strategic plan. And we really had a few major scope items that we put into the RFP and then that we evaluated proposals on. Probably one of the biggest areas is we want to get owner's advisor services for the tertiary upgrade project. That's the progressive design build job for some of revenue. We're looking for an OA, kind of oversee and shepherd the organization through the tertiary upgrades project. Very detailed in the memo what the services would be. Job order contract work has taken a life of its own here. We're doing a lot of work under $1 million on job order contract work. Our engineering basically are in support all of that work. So development, designs, process reviews, things like that. For job, the future capacity assessment for the city's additional 400 GW flow. The plant will be done under one of these BOAs. There's 2 studies that we have in the out years of our CIP. So if you're looking 10 years out, 7 to 10 years out, we're going to have eventually the need for some HVAC and electrical upgrades at the plant that don't happen under phase forward. And then we are also looking for support with our environmental sustainability program, build on the board's goals, as well as our capital improvement program and how we're developing our cash flows and budget process. I think we improve and streamline that to support our overall budget development year over year. I mentioned the procurement process in RFP. On page 5 of the memo, you can see the weighting. Again, but I mentioned this last meeting, a lot of emphasis is going into organization and key personnel, 60 points, 35 points on approach and related experience, and then 5 points on experience with environmental justice, which is kind of discussion on each end. We had a clear gap when we reviewed the proposals, 10 proposals total. We had a clear gap between 1 to 5 and 6 to 10. I made a decision to select 5. So in negotiations with contracts and to get through this evening. I think one thing to mention is we currently have 4 firms providing those services. The owner's advisors are a very niche area, so getting that additional 5th firm, and I was planning to award that is to grow support all that based on the floor. So I think two areas of strategic alignment is the operational excellence as well as our environmental sustainability. I'm about to submit my end of year review to the board, and a lot of what we're going to be doing next year is contained within some of this work from that.
Are there questions from the board? I do. Would you guys compete for the task orders?
Yeah, code specifically prohibits us from doing cost competition on task orders. It was in the memo, Dr. Wyman. It was in the memo under budget funding and we took it out. But code prohibits you from doing that. Can't do that.
So it's, I was wondering when I was reading, but it's whether all 5 firms could do all the different tasks, but it sounds like you have specific tasks kind of like, assign them to different firms based on
Yes.
expertise.
So, yes, I think all 5 firms could do the tasks, but what we tried to do is get the best of the best out of the proposal. So, we were really curious to see out of the proposal, owner's advisor. It was a clear winner for owner's advisor, so we're going with that firm for DOA services, so that one's done. Likely all the firms will support the job board. Future capacity assessment, Planner Caldwell's working on that, we'll continue to work on that. Plant-wide electrical, we haven't assigned yet, but there were strengths, Ms. Hammer, in the proposal that we will use to evaluate what task order he's going to get. And then environmental sustainability, same thing, we're still working through who's going to do that and support the CIP. So, but there was clear strengths and weaknesses amongst the firms, and we kind of summarized those. We didn't want to have any firms who
Right.
good wear, but if you look at the last bullets, we tried to highlight some of the value. And across 5 firms, we have solid experience to be able to take on whatever we need to do in our 6-year roadmaps. That's 4 years.
How do you determine a job work contract if you've got multiple firms that can do the work? You can't bear cost. How do you make a selection decision? That's really the work.
Sometimes it's a capacity. We're just looking at what kind of capacity that we've got from the firms. We're currently doing that right now with the main firms doing task force workforce and I call all to those. Mainly those 2 doing the work for us. I think what we're going to try and do is kind of spread out the work. We have projected about $4 million next year task force work. So what we're going to do is probably divide task forces equally, and we'll get some more time with Pro on his and see how well they do, how they can turn around some of the designs. And then usually we'll find expertise in specific areas, like Jacob's design versus plant. So if it's existing upgrades, a lot of times we go to Jacob's just because of some knowledge there around the history of the plant. So if it's quicker to get to design there. But we're going to try and spread it out this year and see how it goes.
It's very clear that the BOAs really enable us to move quickly and will help with coordination of all the various things going on with phase forward. But on top of page 5, the weighting distribution now. Is that common in these sorts of contract competitions? Do you have any basis to compare that with another utility or another entity that's
Some of the times you'll see 40-40 and 20 on something else. Usually you'll see a lot of weighting on approach and team organization be somewhat equal. I think what we found, you mentioned this last meeting, is that we found that people you get are more important than a firm qualification. And then approach that making right in a proposal. And we, based on that experience over the last 6 years, we're trying to put more emphasis on the people side of things. So we're getting the best people out of these firms, not just the firm's policy or their firm's experience.
and the contracts are written such that key personnel have to be retained.
Right.
Rob, you have questions?
If it's the only one that budget capacity evaluation, is that gonna be a joint, which I think that's saying here.
So the 400 capacity assessment is the city that doesn't only have the capacity for the we're still working through from the technical approach. We're looking at some ideas around upgrades to filters for additional denatrification to get the city additional capacity. So both the design and construction would be funded by the city unless there's any changes unless there's a discussion we have with Fairfax. We want to go back and cost share agreement and rebalance the 60-40 split. We don't usually need to do that right now based on the technical solution that we're looking at, but once we get to that technical solution, we're going to have a meeting with Civil Fairfax. So we're a few months away from that.
Any other questions? We're ready to vote. Motion approved. All in favor? Aye. Moving right along to another joint use. This one is something we can all relate to after our tour. The elevators, the building beneath them now.
Yeah, this was pretty straightforward. As we mentioned, the elevator in building L has been out of service for months at a time because of the key piece of hardware. Powered the elevator to go up and down. So our staff have been using the stairs during the summer and some light. So at this point, the recommendation from our designers, elevator experts, and elevator on-call contractors, the elevator to be replaced. So we're moving forward with that replacement. At the same time, we're going to be rehabilitating the elevator in building G, which was in the 1970s. Both these elevators are kind of seeing, I'm sure, their age. Wanted to try and do this under job order contract. It ended up being too high and we're not allowed to task order split. So we can take an elevator and do one, do the other, so we get it out. We did an IPQ. Invitation for pre-qualification, which the board approved early on when I started here, and then we did IPV, and there was a winning firm at a cost of 2.8 million. Mr. James, we wrote the recommendation in the not to exceed value of 3.5 million, and noted that it reflects the CEO's approval for 25% of change orders or changes on the job. I know it was a comment last meeting, so we wanted to make sure that when we wrote not to exceed, it included the CEO's approval. But we're asking for tonight is the approval of 3.5 million to award a contract to Nichols Contracting, with the understanding that the contractor bid was $2.2 million. That way, it's a true not to exceed value when the board takes action. I don't know if you want me to go through the details of the elevators, Mr. Cohen. I know, but this is followed Virginia code, pretty straightforward.
Very clear.
Was slightly over the engineer's estimate by about $300,000. Bids were between 2 and 2.5. And just as a reminder, job order contract and limits are one. Okay. So the recommendation is to award contract and Nichols Contracting to the price of and not the value of 25625, which includes the CO side.
Any particular reason why he's pre-qualified for and two chose not this?
This game,
One did not show up to the mandatory site visit for the pre or the follow-up to the invitation to bid. And the second is a step to the tentative one.
Further discussion? Your motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Moving right along. Very exciting topic.
Yeah, it.
No. Okay.
Okay, I can advance it
Okay.
if you want or.
Well, good evening. It's hard to believe that years since the board approved the environmental justice policy and a year since we engaged Brown and Caldwell under one of the task order with that existing BOA to do the first step of our environmental justice policy, which is the assessment of our infrastructure and our programs to determine if there have been disparate impacts and then to offer recommendations. Next slide. So we have Priyanka and Carrie here tonight. Rosie couldn't join us. I will get us started and then they'll walk you through the process and then their findings. Next slide. There's the agenda and next. So to refresh your memory on our policy, environmental justice is the equitable treatment and meaningful engagement of our residents so that we can advance our mission without placing disproportionate environmental burdens on those we serve. And the first bullet here, assess AlexRenew's existing infrastructure and programs, develop strategies to address any disparities, is what we'll be discussing tonight. Brown and Caldwell went beyond the scope of this and looked at operations as a whole. Next slide. So the board set our vision, which is really our true north, and these 5 goals as guideposts to get us to true north. So it makes sense, and we'll be speaking the same language for this assessment to use these areas when looking at our infrastructure and operations. So they'll be walking you through that. So I will turn it over to Carrie to take it over from here.
Thank you for the introduction, Amanda.
Carrie, Rosie Jenks is online and
Oh,
available for
fabulous.
questions.
Great. Good evening, Rosie.
Hello.
Next slide. Thank you very much. So just to provide a little context, over the past few years, AlexRenew has developed 3 policies. We have the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, sometimes called the DEI policy. And that's really an internal focused policy, focusing on internal inclusion across the AlexRenew workforce, reducing barriers. And when there's a community benefits policy to provide benefit across all communities. And the newest is the environmental justice policy, focusing on addressing past harms and also taking into consideration into mitigating future impacts of AlexRenew's infrastructure within the AlexRenew community. So we put these together to demonstrate that they're synergistic policies, and all 3 combined really advance AlexRenew goals and intention around community service. And if you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So our approach to this project was to look specifically at environmental justice. And we first began by looking at a number of policies, data collection. We interviewed about a dozen staff across AlexRenew. We then looked really closely at capital improvement program and its intersection with the Alexandria community. And then developed a number of census maps and using federal and state tools that are going to show where the community benefit and environmental justice lens to AlexRenew's infrastructure. So as far as the listening sessions, they were each about an hour. And again, just a number of AlexRenew's leadership. Some of the questions that we asked, how do you reach vulnerable, hard to reach, and diverse communities? What are some project and construction procedures and practices that have EJ considerations? And these questions and the conversations that ensued, they really informed our ability to provide recommendations to identify gaps and also identify a considerable amount of strengths. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The policies, this is just a subset of the policies that we reviewed, but the compensation policy, equity in the workplace. Of course, we looked at the strategic plan as well as the LEAP program. There are a number of policies that are already driving AlexRenew's culture that are important to take into consideration because it shows that history of intention. And lastly, I mentioned that the capital improvement program. So it's important to understand, of course, that your capital program and your capital projects, they're community benefit projects by the nature of what we do as water and wastewater utilities. So I'm going to turn it over to Priyanka to show how the infrastructure across, Alexandria, is really about, providing community service. And it's important to understand that overlay and overlap with the communities that AlexRenew serves.
Thank you. So for the next few slides, please feel free to stop me at any point. There's a lot of information here, but what I'm going to do for the next 4 to 5 slides is talk to you about some maps, some overlays of in the different indices that we did that Carrie mentioned, and looking at the intersection and the impact of AlexRenew's infrastructure on some of those environmental justice communities within Alexandria. So what you have here is the map of Alexandria outlined in blue, and we have AlexRenew's infrastructure in the bright orangish pink color. So we have the interceptors and the 5 pumping stations located throughout the city. The first index that we're going to look at is SNAP. So we have a SNAP data overlay. SNAP is the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, which is a federal program that helps families and individuals in need to help assistance for purchasing food. So I believe you've seen this map before. I think it was brought up for your LEAP presentation. But what we're seeing here is the varying shades of purplish blue is showing different rates of SNAP assistance. So what we're looking at is the darkest areas are the areas which are receiving the highest rates of SNAP assistance, which for here is around 6 to 8%. The national average is actually quite a bit higher at 12%, but when we take a look at the overall Alexandria average, that's only 2.2%. So these areas, these small census areas, are receiving SNAP assistance at 3 times the rate of the average Alexandria. So those communities are on the west side of Alexandria and up in Arlandria. So the next index on the mapping tool that we used was the EPA Environmental Justice Screening and Mapping Tool. This is a tool that uses environmental and socioeconomic indicators to identify areas of environmental justice concern. This is an interesting one, but pretty much what we're looking at is a low income overlay. This is identifying areas in which folks, families are making less than 2 times the national poverty level. So specifically, if you look at the red areas, so up in Arlandria on the west side, these folks, about 95 to 100% of these folks are making less than 2 times the national average national poverty level, which is around 31,000 for a family of 4. So these families are making less than $62,000 a year, and for an individual, that is $15,000 for the national poverty level, so around $30,000. But they're making less than that. So these are some areas of environmental justice concern. What are these? So these aren't census tracts. These are census tracts. They are, but they look different than the last slide. So there's like more granular census tracts, and Okay. each of these maps use like a different size tract. So we're building on top of that. This is another layer from the EPA EJ tool. This is specifically wastewater. And what we're looking at here, it's pretty much mapping what the relative risk is to being exposed to pollutants that from wastewater that flows into the surrounding water body. So Alexandria has a fair amount, including Potomac River, Cameron Run, Holmes Run, to name a few. And what we're seeing here is that it's pretty consistent. Alexandria has moderate vulnerability pretty much across the city. However, when we go to the next slide, this is another layer, also from the same tool. This is specifically the EJ wastewater discharge. And what this does is combines the information from the previous slide with a demographic index, which is an average of the percentage of folks that are low income in these areas, but also those folks that are folks of color. So what we're seeing here is that we're seeing a bigger gradation in color here. So we see red, which means highest vulnerability. However, when we took a look at this information, we see that these areas of red are not caused by AlexRenew's infrastructure, or the intersection of that is specifically when it comes to those socioeconomic topics.
Can you go back to the wastewater discharge?
Yes.
This is concentrated in industry bodies in 500 meters. Divided by distance in kilometers.
So, yeah, go ahead. No, so the EPA has a specific risk assessment model that they use. And so that was a little blurb from there, but I can provide significantly more reading to do. It's like a long one.
I've never seen it.
Sure. So the last one that we have for you today is the CDC Social Vulnerability Index Overlay. This one is slightly different. It combines 15 different census variables that that combined indicate folks that could be have a more difficult time recovering from disasters or preparing for natural disasters. And so some of the variables that there are in this index of the 15 include if your age. So if you're over the age of 65 or under the age of 18, it's more difficult to be able to prepare for natural disasters. If you're disabled, if you are in a single parent home, if you live in a group home. So these are a few of the variables that contribute to creating this vulnerability map. And what we're seeing here is in the darker areas of blue. So up near Falmouth Pumping Station on the west side of Alexandria, those are areas in which we're seeing the highest level of vulnerability. Next. The next thing that we did is we overlaid all of these indices to see if there's any intersection of all those areas that we identified to be the highest level of vulnerability. And what we saw is that when we keep building on top of each other, we're seeing a pattern in where the highest vulnerable communities are in Alexandria. Yeah, okay. But So can we go back to the map? Move on? Yeah. So this map shows us where vulnerable populations exist and where AlexRenew infrastructure exists. We can see where they are relative to one another. What are the impacts to people of living near trunk sewer or a pumping station? You know, beyond just existing near it, is it that there's the possibility of construction happening? Is it sounds? Is it what are the impacts? Is that addressed later on, or I didn't see it in the slides? So just the last thing I wanted to mention is that you can see the overall impact of AlexRenew's infrastructure on these communities quite minimal. And to answer your question, living near Interceptor, that doesn't really have a large effect unless, you know, something breaks, right? Or something bad happens, and that's not part of regular AlexRenew infrastructure operation. Do you want to answer that at all, Carrie?
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's underground, and it does a really good job of showing that while there is infrastructure in the ground in these communities, there's very minimal impact on the communities, which is good to investigate and understand.
So I guess I'm just wondering if there's no impact associated with living near this infrastructure. What is the purpose of the mapping exercise?
It was the only way we were able to determine that was.
How does the map tell you that there's no impact?
I could ask Rosie to speak to that too. I would start by saying, just understanding that the trunks are conveying material back to the plant, but they're very different from like a combined system that would have catch basins that could overflow. But it's still worth understanding and mapping out, you know, what is your footprint and what is the relationship between your infrastructure footprint and the surrounding community, rather than just assuming that there is no.
The age of truck sewers would be a factor. And looking at our CIP, we're not dealing with those ones. And the surcharge, that's similar to the CSO with the one of these lines with lots of capacity. Surcharges for storms. Say something.
Rosie'd like to address that.
Can you guys see me? I can't tell if the camera's visible or not. But yeah, I just wanted to say I'm Rosie Jenks. I worked with this team earlier. I just can't be there today because I have a broken foot. But yeah, this effort was really just to get a baseline understanding of what the intersection of the infrastructure is to start with, and the look at the impacts, if there are any, was part of what we were trying to ascertain. And it's really important for determining how they want to conduct maintenance and if there is an emergency and that sort of thing. It's just really important to know the extra vulnerability that might be occurring in the neighborhood, so they can be conscientious about engagement and how it works, and to do the work in a proactive way with that with the knowledge and that lens going forward is really what this does. And I think the conclusion that we found is that there's not a great deal of disproportionate impact from the type of infrastructure that you have, but it's just a part of setting the baseline as we go forward, to support your intention of not having disproportionate impact with your operations, and to make sure that you're proactively engaging in those areas, which we'll get into in some of the recommendations.
Thanks.
The policy, the first ask, I think, from the board was to assess our existing infrastructure, if we had any current disparities, historic disparities based on our infrastructure. I think the answer is, looking at the study, is no. But when we start talking through how we're going to conduct work moving forward, we might approach a project much differently with this information than we would in the past. If we're going to go up and line home run trunk sewer, we're going to be doing, some sort of historic research, understanding that community a bit better before we go out there and just start lining the pipe. I think another way to look at this too is that, looking at it, stepping back, if we owned a water system and there were lead service lines in that area, we would prioritize maybe doing the lead service replacement in that community first, as opposed to the areas outside of the overlay that the team put together. I think way it's working out for us that we've seen from the study, it's going to help us moving forward programs and projects.
And I think maybe we're using the word impact maybe in two different senses. Because disparate impacts obviously is what you're looking for here. But I was thinking, like, with the lead service line example, it's like, well, why does it matter if you have lead service lines? Well, because you're more likely to have flooding in the water. Why does it matter if you live near a homes run trunk sewer or a pumping station? That, like, if it doesn't, then I feel like that's important to kind of clarify as part of this, because otherwise you're looking at the lens of like, well, oh no, like these vulnerable populations all live near the homes run trunk sewer and the 4 Mile Run pump station or whatever. It's like, that's why I was asking. But when looking at this, I can, I see there's not a disparate impact, but there is infrastructure in these areas. And I think that's, like you said, good to know.
The board wasn't, on some of these emails, but we were, trading emails back and forth. Why is the home run trunk sewer where it is? Well, it followed home run. It was a low point. So, it wasn't put there for a specific reason. It followed the low point of gravity to get to the plant.
I'm still a couple of slides back. We go back to the EPA wastewater discharge map. I think that's about 2 slides back.
This one or the one?
This one. I'm really trying to understand that, because I think when you combine all these factors together, it's hard to follow.
This one is a combination of two.
It is.
Yeah.
It seems like it is.
It is.
It's got some income data in there as
The
well.
previous slide was just the
Or
wastewater.
can you go back one more?
So when you look at just the wastewater, you see that this is just almost like a blank scape, very monotonous, right? It's sort of equal vulnerability across. And, we're aware of, combined sewer overflows, sometimes sanitary sewer overflows and whatever happens, but it's pretty, even
across. But then when you start adding socioeconomic ideas to it, that's when we start to see different rates of
No,
vulnerability.
I've got it now.
Okay.
I was working from the hard copy here.
Yeah, we added this in to, because I feel like it does really explain it. Because when we look at the next one, it looks like, whoa, this is huge. But the wastewater discharge is actually. Exposure to discharge, I find, is really difficult to map because this is an issue I have with EJ screen. Sorry, just as exposure to wastewater discharges is hard to map. I think because the people who are exposed to discharges are the people who use the water body for recreation, fishing, whatever it is that they're doing. It doesn't necessarily map onto where you live. So, but there's no good way to map that. So it's just a frustration for discussing with those issues.
EJ screen is the tool, Mr. Beal, Ms. Hammer mentioned that.
It's it's the EPA, map in EJ magnitude.
You might find that a map that would show language spoken at homes, other language measure would be useful to have. So if you're doing a project, you know, that, for example, the lower right-hand corner, that orange is the lower right-hand corner, would, if we had language there before those units got torn down, it would say Amara is predominantly the language spoken in that particular census term. So I think that would be going to Mr. Carl's point. I think that would be helpful. So if you're doing a project, then we know language that may have to indicate more. So also, you may want to look at where the Mark Center pumping station is. I think it's on the wrong side. So we're in the woods where the defense facilities are.
Thank you. I'm caught up.
Okay. So while we're switching over the slides, so pretty much we went through the process of looking at the disparate, seeing if there were any disparate impacts. And now our next step was to identify the strengths AlexRenew already had and identify some opportunities of growth. And we aligned those with the strategic goals that Ms. Waters mentioned earlier. So operational excellence, thriving workforce, strategic partnership, environmental sustainability, and commitment to the community. The next few slides are pretty word heavy, so I'm just going to go ahead and highlight just a few of the opportunities for each of the strategic goals.
Okay.
So for operational excellence, we divided this into 3 categories. So we had infrastructure and operations, so that was mostly done as a part of the MAPS overlay and the CIP review. We have projects, so current and upcoming projects, and then lastly, how AlexRenew procures its projects. So some of the opportunities when it comes to projects is developing a template to evaluate impacts of future projects. This would be similar to the EPA environmental assessment. So, and we could add a category that would include languages spoken with such this. Another opportunity here is to establish criteria to apply these environmental justice principles to capital planning. And then lastly, to develop an environmental justice checklist evaluation checklist that you can use at different stages of our project. So for design, for construction, after construction, very similar to a QA/QC process. Moving on to thriving workforce. Next, please.
Before you get there, I apologize. I have a city council event. I need to go to. All right. Thank you very much.
So for thriving workforce, we looked at how AlexRenew recruits its workforce and how they develop. So a couple of the opportunities when it comes to recruitment is continuing to raise awareness of the apprenticeship program within disadvantaged communities so that folks know that a job at AlexRenew is a successful career that they can have, but also start mentorship initiatives at disadvantaged schools and communities in Alexandria. Another opportunity here is to develop regional partnerships to support recruitment.
On the workforce development side, it's continuing to expand your apprenticeship program and then works with local partners, so the 6 or 7 local utilities and authorities to support a regional apprentice curriculum. And then internally, there's an opportunity to develop and manage your training program for your staff here. Next. So AlexRenew has a myriad of strategic partnerships within the Alexandria community, throughout the Northern Virginia region, and throughout the Commonwealth. Some of the opportunities here are to continue to expand on those partnerships and to reach additional community stakeholders to make sure that you're not impacting communities of EJ concern. And then on the federal state side, there's an opportunity to collaborate with regional partners such as the Chesapeake Bay Foundation or the Potomac River Keeper on legislative priorities such as funding for projects. Next. AlexRenew prides itself in being a sustainable organization. This very building is platinum certified, which is the highest ranked sustainability indicator for buildings. And some of the opportunities here are to continue to increase the sustainability of the biosolids programs through the future upgrades that are happening, promote waste generation, reducing waste generation, and also encouraging the use of low greenhouse gas emission transportation, and promoting the metro benefits that AlexRenew has to offer.
Can you say a little bit about how those recommendations or opportunities kind of relate to the environmental justice aspect, specifically as opposed to just like our overall sustainability goals?
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to biosolids program, the more energy reduction that you have, the better it is for the environment overall and the local Alexandria community. When it comes to waste generation, that's a similar thing. And greenhouse gas emissions, we know this area is pretty congested. So the more that you reduce that, the better impact that you have on those EJ communities, because they are often disproportionately affected by greenhouse gas emissions. They're closer to highways and stuff like that.
You know, the first one I think is going to take congestion off streets, and that could relate back to EJ. You know, the haul routes, you know, will be less truck traffic. The haul route will be less impactful to the community. Same goes for waste generation. I think for looking at transportation, you know, we do promote the use of metro benefits. It's not widely used by staff, but at the same time, I feel like we're a little behind the curve on getting some sort of green fleet or supporting a green fleet from our staff. You know, from an EJ lens, I think that's a tougher one. Maybe ask Rosie or Harry to help weigh in on, but it just felt like for us, it was an area that we needed to improve on. I don't know how we can tie that one back necessarily to EJ specifically for the use of green fleet, other than not having emissions in the community. Outside of that.
Yeah, with most diesel traffic, greenhouse gas emissions, you also have particulate matter. Even with diesel particulate filters, you still have a considerable amount of particulate matter along those truck routes. So being able to move to cleaner burning or zero emission vehicles is a win.
This is actually something that I would think would be interesting to map, right? Like, where are the trucks hauling? Like, which are they driving through those vulnerable census tracts? Like, if those are impacts we're causing for the community, then that seems like it would be worth evaluating as well. Or like, you know, exposure to any waste that we generate or air pollution that comes from the facility. There's an opportunity to add those layers in, because, you know, our impact is not just wastewater, it's also all the other side effects, I guess, of what we do.
And then last but not least, we took a look at commitment to the community. So 3 categories here as well, which include transparency, visibility, engagement, customer service. You see that there are a lot of strengths here.
But some of the opportunities for engagement are continuing to assess community engagement and participation. So those folks who are actually, responding to social medias, coming to meetings, seeing how you can further reach other parts of the Alexandria community. Another larger long-term project is looking at developing a historic resource kit. So understand Alexandria's past to inform future decisions and future projects. And then also potentially consider developing a general stakeholder advisory group, not just for specific projects. In terms of customer service, AlexRenew has an excellent customer service team that's very responsive and proactive. And the opportunity here is to develop a deeper understanding of the customer's social and economic profiles. So you can identify underserved areas, but then also help promote our legalization of LEAP and other payment assistance programs. So that's all for strengths and opportunities. So I'm going to hand it over to Carrie, and she's going to talk a bit. Go ahead.
Before we hand it over,
Before I hand it over.
let's leave it. This is a very important slide.
Yes.
Because I think before you can have justice, we have to really understand who you serve and who you impact. And I think we have a good understanding, but it could be better. I think the nature of this town is there's a portion of folks who are very active and very involved. And then the other portion, which might be 50% or more, are so busy with their lives. They don't have time to worry about things. And I worry we don't understand all of our stakeholders. And you're beginning to capture that in the lower right-hand corner of the chart. But this is where I would like to see our effort, the first step of this effort, to really identify, I guess the word we're using, affinity groups that we don't ordinarily hear. Somebody who's working 2 jobs to put bread on the table doesn't have time to come to a SAG, right? Or somebody that is too busy with their life doesn't have time to really worry too much about what AlexRenew does, whether the bill is fair. I also think our business community, I'm not sure we really understand how our rates impact them. Very, very often don't hear a lot. I think that's part of justice too, is understanding all the folks we serve, all the folks we impact, and how do they view us? I think that's something that I hope comes out of this assessment effort. It's really understanding and creating a way, hearing them. It doesn't have to be formal meetings or formal committees, but how do we get a pulse check on the folks that we ordinarily don't hear from? Probably run on like portions. We think that could be. The active group is probably 25% of the population.
That's generous.
90%?
This is going to be, we're going to talk about this in January, right?
Community
Outreach.
Yeah.
I think one thing to note that, when you go back to slide 16, if you look at that slide and Ms. Shaha, Lord, you don't have to that. Ms. Shaha hit on that on the last bullet, but part of doing this assessment, looking at the different tools available to us to do census tracts, will already help us with our LEAP outreach and our LEAP program, because we've now identified specific areas that have some fair impact that we can focus our outreach to poorly and get them assistance for where we really do have an impact overall in the city through a billing, right? Our infrastructure might not have a significant, our existing infrastructure might not have a significant impact, but our bills certainly do hit these communities just like they do the rest of the city, and this might be a way for us to strategize, and we have not come up with any ideas yet on this. We just got a presentation recently to review, but ways to reach out to these communities to enhance our LEAP enrollment and really get support, for potentially low-income customers. We have a clearer view than we did 1 year ago, looking at some of these sensitive ways of data. Than when we started with our affordability discussion last September. Every step that we've kind of moved in this direction has helped.
No, by the way, I agree. Everything we've done with LEAP has opened our eyes in a big way. But I think the problem isn't only on that end of the curve. I think there are problems on the other end of the curve too. Business community, smaller community. But how do we hear them? It's a good step in the right direction.
So the whole thing on, I want to go back to your summary map. I think the maps are fascinating for a lot of reasons. But the one thing that hits me with this is that the plant here is our largest capital. It's also the most visible and has in the impact on the community. And none of the areas around the planet are highly vulnerable. So I think that's a good thing. But the other side of that is that the plant probably affects the community, does affect the community. It goes back to what Ms. Hamish said about the wastewater vulnerability. That it really is best measured by the people. But at least for the benefits of that.
I think you addressed one of the things that is regarding the new basically all these people who have to go basically talk to those guys, let them know this is a program we are failing. That's right. The other thing that I had regarding the apprenticeship program, you seem regional. Do you guys provide them certification for them? Are those certification transferable if they decide to go? Service very well about that.
Licensure, if they get specific licensure, so the apprentice program set to certain stages that has milestones. The milestones in the apprentice program aren't transferable, but they all lead to a license, which would be transferable in the state. And we're working with, we work with D4 to accept licensure from other states as well coming into Virginia. So that's something we do on the back end, on the lobbying side, to make sure that if someone's coming in here from Florida, their license will transfer. That we can't necessarily do that for every state, but if they leave Community USA, the license, class 1 license go away. Class 4
How you guys prioritize the CIP?
Sorry,
So how you prioritize the CIP project?
at the moment?
Yeah.
Mhm. At the moment, the regulatory changes at this very moment, it's driven by a need to upgrade aging infrastructure, regulatory changes, and AlexRenew was a state mandated program. So
So what I was trying is to put in this environment justice where you guys plan prioritize your project, basically to give a little bit more weight
right,
for its community,
correct,
the project than in the order.
correct. That would, I think, being the tool and the screening tool that we would use as part of the safety planning process that we would build. And EJ would be in there and would get a weight before we start to the work in the community. Or if something's going to affect the water quality in a negative way at the plant, that would get a priority, going back to Mr. Fields. But yeah, there's tools that and you know this from your work at DC Water, the tool we need to develop internally based on feedback we got from the assessment.
Okay. So through this study, we have 2 additional more global recommendations that we want to do today. And one is the recommendation of instituting guiding principles that put policy into action. So what are guiding principles? We just heard about a number of opportunities to advance environmental justice. There were specific actions or objectives that will be completed over a defined time period. Whereas guiding principles, they're timeless. They're foundational philosophies. that help guide how an organization's leaders and staff make decisions, how they conduct themselves. So what we have here are actual statements that are within the community benefits and environmental justice policies that cannot be accomplished by achieving a specific action. They can't be put on a checklist. Yet they're still part of your policy. So what do we do about that? So being able to articulate these aspirations that you have in your policy as guiding principles, it enables leadership to communicate to staff that these principles are important and they really need to shape decisions that are made on a day-to-day basis and on a longer-term strategic level. And it also enables leaders within AlexRenew to embody and exemplary these foundational values and show what good looks like. And so being able to call them out is really important, and having them in one place for folks to understand and see that intersection that we've been talking about the whole time between diversity, equity, inclusion. That's one community. Environmental justice, community benefit. This enables us to think about how we want to communicate these values to staff and what that might look like. And I think a good metaphor might be several years ago, communicating the importance of health and safety. And it wasn't just health and safety check a box, it was safety tailgates. It was bringing it up in the first 5 minutes of each meeting. It was signs in new places. We want to think about that because we're talking about cultural change. Any questions on this concept? Okay, if you wouldn't mind, go to the next slide, please. And the final recommendation is that we think about updating the community benefit policy to be comprehensive of the other policies. Environmental justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, and the LEAP program. So that we have all of these policies in alignment with one another and the cascading results are clear internally and externally. It's something to consider, but organizational alignment around values can often be a next stage of maturity once you have accomplished a lot of the initial actions that you set forth to live out those particular policy values. Any questions on this concept?
Just as a reminder for the board, we have a community benefit policy. It is the one policy as a group we have not touched yet. I think it's good we kind of pause on that one with tonight's discussion and our discussion in January around community outreach and engagement will set us up nicely for taking these considerations into governance and influence. If it's something we'd like to consider. Looking at the employees of the organization, it's hard. There's safety, quality, there's permit, there's PJ flying around, there's DEI, a lot of different initiatives that we could also help streamline internally to staff for communicating them around community benefit. They understand the benefit they provide to the communities, but it's not captured with these other categories we have on the slide, like EJPs and or opinions. And our community benefit policies, we've read it quite adequately.
It's funny, if you read the vision statement, the vision statement, that is community. So, single problem.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So amendment
We're gonna do the situation itself.
I'm gonna do the takeaway by candy.
Oh, okay.
All right, okay. Here you go.
Yeah, I mean, we covered a lot. And we tried to curate the slides so they are a useful reference. But just to cover next steps, what we've learned is very pleasing surprise that AlexRenew was already well on its way to adopting an environmentally just culture. And being able to put things in writing with a policy just really helps clarify to our stakeholders, our employees, our public, what we stand for. All the way up to, as you said, AlexRenew's mission and vision, where we want to move forward. I won't go over all of these, but really it's operationalizing the recommendations, prioritizing what should occur in the next 6 months, what's important over the next year, who gets involved, and what staff own which initiative, so that it again becomes part of the culture and that these values don't sit to the side of AlexRenew's philosophy and way of conducting.
Everything we do seems to touch each other.
Yes.
Nature's one.
So, this is really good. And this is gonna be really useful, especially forward looking, the ways that we discussed. And I really appreciate it. I'm not sure that based on this information, that we can say that there's no disparate impact, because it doesn't feel like a complete evaluation of all of our needs. It does feel like this like step one of identifying what our impacts on the community are was kind of skipped over, and we went straight to mapping the vulnerable populations in the city. But this conversation about like what are our like air and vehicle emissions, like where is our waste going, where there are ways that we impact the community beyond just where the truck sewers are. So I'm not sure what to do with that comment. I don't know if there's room to continue working on this and either timelines or budget, but it doesn't feel like it's a complete assessment.
Mind if I just share? I think that's a really astute observation and spot on. So when we think about these types of efforts, it's more about a journey based in humility and curiosity. The intention here isn't a snapshot. It's really about AlexRenew being a learning organization. And this is another example of learning. As Rosie had said, we did want to start with a baseline understanding to lay that foundation. And, when we're really talking about community DEI, it's how we treat one another, how we are stewards to our environment, how we're stewards to the assets that are entrusted into our care and the dollars that are entrusted into our care. So, I'm hoping that people think of this as more the beginning of an important conversation and not a nice thing.
I appreciate that. But I think maybe there just needs to be some reframing of what this information is and isn't. I wouldn't be comfortable like putting this out there and saying like we have no disparate impacts. Because I don't think we can say that based on analysis.
Yeah, I don't want to give that impression. Thank you for the feedback.
But let me add on to that. Because we all spend a lot of our days sitting behind computers, think all data is digital. We do, right? You see it in the maps, right? Looking at quartiles and quintiles and all that stuff. Some of the best data is hearing people and seeing things. And I think those input avenues have to be part of our data collection. I just encourage you to get beyond the spreadsheet, get beyond the GIS to listening to people that we never hear from. Walking around these little red neighborhoods, walk around it. Why is that red in our little GIS map? Who lives there? And the beauty of Alexandria, it's so small, you can almost walk in. Not very nice. It's tiny, 15 square miles. So I just would encourage you to broaden the aperture and get inputs that are not necessarily bits and bytes.
It is unfortunate. I mean, it's tough because a lot of the data that you need in order to assess some of these impacts are not readily available from existing data sets, right? Like, in order to identify which communities are out there subsistence fishing in our local waterways, like you can't, that's not available unless you go out and talk to people. Or, who are the workers who are, who work on the farm where we send our biosolids. It's like that's not something that you can get from existing data sets. So it's hard. And I feel, I understand. But it's very hard.
Journey and data sets are going to be incomplete.
So we're looking at our discharge though, we're on discharge to the plant, via our BZPF. There, in the mapping, there isn't the vulnerabilities around our district. So we're meeting our permits and for what we do. I understand the error piece that we should account for whatever we do that creates emissions.
Well, we will still have CSO discharges even after river bridges. Obviously, are fewer, but that is exposure. I'm not sure I saw CSO outfalls on the map. I missed that. All of them.
I guess just to make sure that we're, when we look at disparities, definitely the haul roads, I could go through an analysis to make sure that we're not impacting some of the community. I think CSOs are an easy one to kind of show on the map and do a takeaway slide. Do we want to, was the idea to expand outside city limits and start looking at some of the farms where biosolids are being hauled, or do we want to keep our focus internally? We're just making sure we have to correct and going back to the drawing board again.
Yeah.
To update some of these areas.
Actually, report.
Haul routes and, I think haul routes, yes, I'm definitely, we can certainly take a look at how chemicals come in, how biosolids go out, any other major hauling. Or at least address it and make sure it's supplemented in this assessment. Same with CSO discharges, but I want to make sure that we can capture some of these areas. Is there anything else, Ms. Hammer, that you might have played?
I mean, to your question, I don't think we should cease caring about people when they leave city borders. So I don't know how hard it would be to look at.
You know exactly where we're going. It's on looking at that community and say,
But I
if there is very impact, we could take a look and see if it is. But I just want to make sure, internally, that there's emissions wise, we don't really have emissions from pump stations or any other location. Making sure we're getting a list. So if anything pops in your mind,
okay, let me think.
feel free to email.
Those are the ones that.
And we'll make sure that we can come back and revisit this with the board and supplement maybe tonight talk about the infrastructure, but not necessarily the program, which would be a whole.
You're good, thank you. Moving on to,
Sorry, one last comment. The list of recommended actions is really good, and I would like to make sure we don't not do, we've got to move some of them forward. So, kind of keeping that on the agenda, just how we can operationalize these recommendations.
will be on my annual review form for you to review. Totally.
Yeah.
Those, so again, they're gonna be aligned in each. The way the team organizes and the outcomes, that's how we organize our annual review and how we do a capital plan, how we do a business plan every single year. Will be captured in there. And we're gonna start, once we get alignment, chipping through those as part of our goal. This is a big. The outcomes of this are going to be some of our goals. To do some of these, create some of these tools and do some of these further stuff. But to finish off tonight, you know, I think we could make sure we're hitting the mark on some of the operations people. That'd be helpful.
Oh, no, this is very important discussion. Move right into the monthly report. Carl, highlights you want to say? How about jump right into strategic partnering goes?
Okay. All right. Would like to note that PN for the month of November was 1.6. Lowest we've had it. Because of the organization. Current limit is 3. A lot of that has to do with the hard work we're doing in solid. We've been in DO control since August. Yeah. It's all about control since August, and we're hitting a current limit of 1.6. We usually just skip over this day, but that is pretty darn good.
Great.
Ties back to our pro special program that we established about 2 years ago. We're here, we talked about page 4 and page 2. We talked about our goals. Talked about the elevators, and we're on page 3. Talked through strategic partnerships. General Assembly session starts on the 8th. Before I do want to come to some of the key items, I do want to mention before this on those key dates that we are working with our legislative partners to request some additional funding for AlexRenew in the amount of 50 million to make up for some of the costs that we've incurred on the program over the last 2.5 years. Really since that was the case, some of what we had to do with the extension of urban by 1 year, so we have 2023. So we're going to be coordinating with the city. We're going to be coordinating with the general assembly, with the department of things to issue budgets, with the government budget.
And the governor's budget is going to show that there's a surplus, proposed tax breaks, but the general assembly will not approve everything in the governor's budget. But the good news is there is going to be a viable surplus in the state, so that's any part request. I went over these dates last month, but as Mr. Paul mentioned, the general assembly will convene on January 8th. The crossover date is good, so the questions that will go on the actually pre-filed legislation, and there hasn't been anything thus far that we have flagged that we'll start providing reports.
And we jump over to page 5, section 5.2, Mr. Robertson, if you want to walk through customer delinquency, and leave and ask for this evening to adjust our lease.
So if you'll look at the chart on actually, I think it's on page 6, you can see the number of accounts and our total dollar amount for the residential delinquent customers and delinquent customers stayed relatively the same. We have approximately 63% of that delinquency value is represented by residential accounts. That is in part because if you'll recall, Virginia American Water had not only issues with their own cybersecurity incident, but they also were trying to adapt to the general assembly changes to disconnections. And they've had some slow rollout of their own disconnections starting basically in July. So they're playing some catch up there. And as a result, we have some limited disconnections on our end as well. That's why we only disconnected 14 customers last month. Of those 14 that were disconnected, you'll see 9 pay their balance in full. That is sort of an uptick in customers that are paying their balance in full. And we think that's largely because some of the higher balances are either on payment plans now, or they were able to pay off their bill. And now you have more customers that have, in that $200 and less amount owed. So they're able to pay it pretty quickly. One of those customers received a leaf disbursement. That's something we had this month. And then in total, there have been 144 disconnections, which is a relatively small amount considering we've been disconnecting since July. Of those total disconnections, 13 accounts have now received a total of $4,285 in leaf disbursements, just a little less than half our total amount from the leaf dashboard. And if you'll jump over to the leaf dashboard.
Before we go to that, so just big picture, delinquent accounts, we have about 1,000, and 60% of them are on payment plan. Okay. What's the right number? What's the right percent on payment?
So, the payment plan number is always going to fluctuate. It's actually down a little bit from last month. People either complete their payment plan or they fail to make a payment, in which case they can re-enroll. So it's going to be a number that shifts over time constantly. I think we always try to encourage payment plans and persons as much as possible here, just as a matter of the service group. I don't know that there's a right number. I think something that's worth at least knowing in the back of your mind is if we have a large number of customers on payment plans, the delinquent amount is going to be paid over a longer period of time as a result, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to account for.
So let's go through a scenario.
Okay.
I'm delinquent. Say I owe AlexRenew $400.
Yeah.
About ready to cut my water line. So I join a payment plan. Create a payment plan. That keeps my water on. Next payment comes due, I don't make it. What happens?
You don't make
I don't make a payment.
a payment to your current account?
Yeah.
Then your payment plan is void.
It's void.
You'll get,
What happens next?
So you will get a ton of notices to pay your payment plan. If you don't pay your balance due, then, so we kind of keep an eye on customers that basically do exactly what we're talking about. They kind of jump up the list in terms of disconnection, but they're also, once you haven't paid your bill, you get back onto the list of getting a phone call, the letter, all of that before your service is terminated. And then you're also jumped to the top of this. So you will get a final, kind of aggressive warning that says you're in danger of disconnection and then several days. And somebody will go turn off the water.
But if I say, well, can I get back on a payment plan?
You can do
Anytime. Respect?
that. People do play that game. It happens.
Okay, and so we're keeping an eye on that.
Yeah, for sure. And as I said, we track those customers. Tend to play that game.
For clarification, if you charge the dashboard, the disconnections and the distortions, these are to date, these are not
So these are up until November 3rd.
from the time we started.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, so for instance, this month, dashboard, we increased the number of customers. That number is 35 in total. Something else worth noting is, so we've been meeting with Virginia American Water frequently, both to talk about
disconnections, but just kind of to help form that partnership, which is something we haven't necessarily done in the past. But one of the things that came up on our last call is our lead assistance communications. And the Virginia American Water was asking, how many customers have we been able to help? And I said, well, we had only, started in July, so we only helped 35. And they were shocked that we were able to basically help 35 customers. They said they didn't have a single dealer, they helped that many people, a much larger customer base than us. It's just something to note. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the bar is extremely high, but
Do you have any kind of background for that? Like, how much the taste? Is it,
so like why our lead program is successful, first of all.
there's a so successful?
Well, they're not doing the same communications effort that we are essentially, but we have lead and payment plans on our door hanger. We mentioned it in phone calls, we mentioned text messages, we send out emails to every delinquent customer. So we're basically bombarding with information about payment plans and lead, and I don't think.
It's easy to not give money away if you don't.
Yeah, I think that's in large part their problem. I think they put some effort around it, but I don't think it's on every single.
Comes back again to the same thing, people didn't control. So the same engaging community educate and tell us these things that them. And that's probably when you guys succeeded in America. So,
And hopefully that grows over time. We've only really been communicating about it 5 months from the standpoint that you can see these funds. So it's a pretty short period of time. So if you look at the expended date, you'll see we have 10,000, and then we have $97,000 in the pot. We have another large check that's on its way from basically the city reimbursing us for things. So that pot's going to grow significantly. And I say that because if you'll recall, when we started this program, we had about $20,000 in the pot. We looked at the median bill from our delinquent customers and came up with 350. And at that point, we even said, we would this in 3 months. So basing this off of A, how much money we're about to have in the pot, and then B, also looking sort of, instead of just strictly at a median bill, we're looking at each percentile. And if we raise, so, the median bill would be at about the 50 percentile, that's around 350 still. If you increase that to the 75th percentile, then you're at about $1,000, which means you could cover the vast majority of our customers. I mean, all of that with $1,000. So if we raise that to $1,000, we cover roughly 75% of customers.
So I noticed that, so of the disbursements that you've given out to date, fewer than a quarter of them were like enough to cover most or all of their outstanding balance. I also was gonna say that we spent, we gave out money this month and the number went up in the pot. It's like, oh boy. How much more? Okay, so you guys are gonna kill me, but I have more database requests. If we could somehow track money that's incoming, that would be interesting for us to see.
We have that.
Okay, as part of this dashboard. And I also find it difficult to figure out what's going on month to month. Like I have to go back into my large stack of paper to find last month's piece of paper. And then I have to scribble the numbers from last month on the paper.
So maybe increases for each statistic?
Yeah, or something I defer to you on
Time
that.
Yeah.
But just to see if the rate of people were reaching drops or, I think those are important data points to have. But I also think the end of the calendar year is a good time if you're gonna make any program policy changes, like increasing the amount of dollars available it's time to do that.
And well, and I think $1,000 too is something that you could do, you know, while we're trying to get kind of a handle on our disconnections, and then again, you could maybe pull that back.
And most people wouldn't take $1,000 because if you look
Yeah,
at the chart, I mean, most people are under 1,000. I mean, there is a few with huge balances.
The current check on the way to dollar energy will put us around $150,000.
Yeah.
So if you, going back to the quintiles that Matt referenced, you know, 30% of our customers with a delinquency are above $833. So that's 80%, so 30% above that. Have an arrear that's greater than $833. So what we want to propose is set that around 1,000 to capture 643 customers. If every single customer below $1,000 with a delinquency takes funds from REIT, it'll be $166,000, which we have money, but we're not going to get 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no way.
Yeah, not nearly all those people.
But even looking at some of the customers that we're taking money, you know, we have a lot in that, you know, $400 to $500 area that will just knock out that arrears and allow them to get back on track. Remember, we're in this situation because we haven't been shut off for 5 years. And we're dealing with a 5-year arrears. It's not, this data is not normal. We're dealing with an arrears for 5 years, and there's no way we should have arrearages. 10% of our customers with arrears over $2,000, the max being $10,000. It's like that when we haven't done so. So in order to try and take a bite out of it, we have the money sitting in the account. But the recommendation is to let's up that value, help our customers out, for carrying the burden through COVID, through other issues that might have happened since 2019. We're going on 6 years. And try and pay down that arrears. This is not a normal arrears for an organization to carry. There, because we haven't done this.
And you're saying that if we were to do this, take it up to 1,000, recognizing this is a 5-year historical problem. Once we've done that, we might ratchet it back.
When we figure out we don't know our normal yet as an organization. We're not there.
This is to digest the whole.
I mean, we've got the funds, that's what it's there for, let's digest it. 642 customers that put, you know, we could pay it off completely.
You need a vote.
We don't need a vote, we just want to, well, you vote.
No, I, to be honest with you,
General nod from the board, that.
no, I would like the board to be accountable. Because I think there will be critics. I don't want you to take the heat. I want to.
You don't care about haters.
So before we do that, looking at your chart, before COVID, what was our typical number?
$200,000. That was $200,000.
Total arrears was around
100.
Nicer than $1 million.
Well, and we've also been somewhat hindered with disconnection fees when we're doing 15 disconnections a month. It's going to have an effect, but it's not quite what it did when we saw the peak run through COVID.
But I'll move. And we raise the leap amount to $1,000 for this purpose. Word, for the purpose of clearing and prove the arrearages that caused great pandemic. That's the motion. Second. All in favor?
Anything else?
Very good.
If anybody has any other questions, I mean, the only other thing I might point out is you can see, we talked earlier about how people were beginning to pay off the total bill amount. And you can see this is chronological from left to right on the last page. So you can see that the leave disbursements this past month were actually a lot lower than the last. The only other thing we're trying to make. If anybody has any other questions.
Moving right along to the final item on the agenda, the AlexRenew dashboard.
If you jump over to 30 minutes, the budget request, and on somebody jump over to page 3. we're just shy of 75% complete. It's a big milestone this month on page 3. I'll take a December milestone since happened yesterday, but host running receptor is now operational. We're supposed to come to the plant from outfall 3 and former outfall 4 with the local. But we got work from the plant. Really excited. We're doing some number crunching to find out what percent reduction that is for CSOs and how many millions of gallons per year, but it's an interim improvement for water quality.
And I assume that's gonna be on the website.
That's working on it, right? We need to have a number for millions of gallons. Yeah, right. Penalty Street site, we sent a note on the board, we shrunk our footprint significantly there. We are now at the stage of the north end of the site, we expect to stay there through September, where we'll do a ribbon cutting ceremony opening up the pump. The south end of the site is going to be turned over to RTN, and they're going to start your demolition and there's a box. We are helping them out a little bit by bringing in some, and we build the site, raise it up for development. We are bringing stability in the area where we're mainly to raise a small area that we're constructing and impact to around it. So a good story from a good partner. AlexRenew site, we just had a major pour. You can see on the picture on the bottom right, that's our concrete foundation, and you can see the pillars that walk through the plant of the superstructure coming up out of the ground. So no longer going down, we're coming up. Total spent to date, just shy of 470 million on page 4. And then we've got our final SAG meeting on page 5 tomorrow evening. Right below that,
Thursday.
what's that? Oh yeah, Thursday, sorry. Final SAG meeting on Thursday evening. Fear and Loathing in AlexRenew book coming out with Moxie. You'll see it when you go. Moxie and her team take a trip. Down the tunnel. Fear and Loathing in the Waterfront Tunnel. The book is in the mail.
Are you gonna have,
Hopefully, if we get the book before the holiday, we'll make sure the board members get
are
a
you
copy.
gonna have the 7 cartoons or the original book?
Yeah. But you can't see the picture there, but all their faces are different. Looking ahead, we're gonna have a community day for cultural dedication. In the spring, I mentioned the Penalty Street site will then be, September, that'll be a ribbon cutting. In the spring, on Push Road, we're gonna be unveiling the African American Heritage Park signs, as well as what we're calling the Reflection Grove that has not been yet named by the city. We'll work with the city and their social justice committee to come up with a name for it. Great. The right kind of funding for it. We had a final council board work group meeting last month, and we will be sending out a flyer to city council moving forward on a quarterly basis. And so the progress. And then the last page, just a really cool picture of the front statement. You can see the beams and supports of our now underground, 1213 underground pumping station, the wall, and floors are nearing completion, and bringing in the mechanical equipment to the water pump.
Quick thing that I meant to mention when I was talking about the, did you all see the EPA water affordability assessment that came out today? Oh, so under the bipartisan infrastructure law, EPA was required to do a study of the prevalence of households nationwide that have unaffordable water and sewer bills, and the report was released, the study was released today. And the study itself is really interesting, be maybe good to see, like, look at their methodology and see if we can learn any lessons from it. But in connection with the launch of the study, they also launched a whole water affordability website that's got a lot of resources, and there's a page that's like resources for utilities, and just encourage you guys to check it out.
Is this different from the financial capability
Yes.
assessment they put out in
Yes,
October?
this is a study. It's,
Okay.
it's a study that estimates the number and percentage of households nationwide that have unaffordable water and sewer bills using a couple of different thresholds, like percent of household income. And then it estimates how much money would be required nationwide if Congress were to establish a permanent assistance program, how much money it would take to bring all those households into affordable bill territory. And then it includes policy recommendations for like establishing the program and then some technical assistance pieces. It's really good. But it's not guidance, it's not a regulation, it's a study.
One of the things that we didn't mention to the board, the EPA did put out, when we talked about affordability, September 2023, we looked at an EPA metric for, how do we faring on Andrea, and it was the 20% income over our water costs. They put out new methodology to do that calculation through financial capability index. That's one piece of it. Being household income is another. We just ran those numbers. So at some point, maybe in the future, we'll bring up the board to present for us.
So the study is a different methodology, which is interesting, because it looks at the individual household, the number of households whose bill is greater than 4.5, combined water and sewer is greater than 4.5% of our household.
MHI.
No.
Their household income.
Yes, their household, yeah. So it's interesting, anyway, look at it, it's good. Yeah, it cites a report I wrote, so I'm a little biased.
Oh, okay.
No, it's really good.
Feel free to know about the,
Okay, I'll send it to you.
I mean, when you see it too. Hey, board members.
Any other business? Before we adjourn, I'd like to wish all board members and members of AlexRenew very happy holidays. It has been a very eventful year. And year ahead is going to also be very eventful. One thing that I'm very thankful for, enormously proud of, is AlexRenew provides the most fundamental public service public organization does. Maintaining clean water is something that goes back to all the time. And you all do it so well and are so embraced positively by this community. We should be so proud. I'm very proud of this. Wish everybody a very happy new year.
Well, thanks to staff for the voice of it.
Oh,
That was just awesome.
that's great.
That was very good.
I appreciate all the comment.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This time, I think, board business. I reached out to HR for the Hampton Road. So I reached out to them like 1 month ago.